Of today's daf is Nazir Daf Nun Ches Nazir 58. We're going to start at the bottom of Nun Zayin Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. And Gemara is discussing whether or not Hakafas Kol Harosh is also prohibited. There's a prohibition from the Torah, Usakifu Pas Roshachem, and that you're not allowed to cut off the corners of your head, and also Osashlis es Pas Sigonecha. You also cannot cut off the corners of your beard. In that context, the Gemara has raised the idea that there's a position that while it's prohibited to cut off the corners of your head, if you cut off all the hair from your head, you're not in violation of the prohibition, that perhaps the prohibition is only to cut off the corners and leave the hair in the middle of the head. So the Gemara, and what would be the logic? Because if you cut off all the head, then you didn't just cut off the corners. Maybe the prohibition is just to show that the corners have been cut off. So the Gemara says that maybe this discussion about whether or not that kafas kol harosh, that if you cut off all the hair off your head, you're not in violation. Maybe that's a dispute amongst the Tanaim. Maybe is Tanahi. Maybe it's an earlier dispute amongst the Tanaim. The Tana Rabbanan Rosho, it says in the pasuk about the Nazir that he has to cut off all the hair of his body and also the hair of his head. So why does it need to emphasize the hair of his head? It already says Sa'aro, he has to cut off all the hair off of his body. So the Gemara explains that what does the Brisa say? Ma Talmud Omer, why does it say Rosho? Afisha Nemar Bosakifu Pas Rashachem, because there's another prohibition by a regular person. He's not allowed to cut off the corners of his head. Yachol, I might think af mitzora. Okay, and I might think also mitzora is prohibited to cut off the corners. He just has to cut off all the rest of his hair, but not the corners of his head. Talmud Rosho. So the first brisa that we're citing says that you're supposed to cut off mitzora. The word Rosho tells us mitzora, even though everyone is prohibited in the cutting off the payos, the mitzora is allowed to cut off the payos, or he has to cut off the payos. And then there's a second brisa, V'tanya idach. The other brisa says, what do we do with the word Rosho? Ma Talmud Lomar. Why do we say the word Rosho? Not because of the prohibition, the general prohibition of payos, but because of the prohibition of a Nazir, that a Nazir is not allowed to cut off the hair, his hair. Shenemar Agabi Nazir. It says with respect to Nazir, Tar lo yavar Rosho. Nazir is not allowed to bring a razor onto his head. Yachol af Nazir mitzora kain. I might think also a Nazir who's also a mitzora, that he's not allowed to cut off the hair off his head. Tamaloma Rosho. So the Brisa says that the word Rosho teaches us that a mitzora of Nazir cuts off the hair off of his head. So there are two Brisas. The first Brisa says that the word Rosho teaches us that a mitzora can cut off his payos. The second brisa teaches us that a mitzora is a Nazir, uses that same word Rosho, but takes in a different direction to tell us that a mitzora is a Nazir, cuts off the hair off of his head. My lav Tanai. Don't you want to say that this is a dispute amongst the Tanaim? And what's the dispute? Lamanda Amar de Nazir, the one who says that the word Rosho teaches that a mitzora is a Nazir, could cut off the hair off his head. Because Savara Kafas Kol Rosho Shma Kafa. Because these are the reasoning that cutting off all the hair off of your head is not a violation of cutting off your payos, because you cut off all the hair off your head. So you don't need the pasuk to tell us that the mitzora can cut off his payos. So therefore, why do we need the pasuk? We only need the verse to override the commandment of a Nazir, which is both a positive commandment and a negative commandment. Kadel Sarosho, you have to let your hair grow, and also Rosho. So there's both a positive commandment and a negative commandment for a Nazir to cut his hair, and so therefore the commandment of the mitzora, the word Rosho, is needed to override that. So he doesn't need a pasuk to tell us that he could cut off the payos, because that's not a prohibition to cut off all the hair off your head. That's the second brisa. But the first brisa says, "Akafas kol rosh shma kafa." No, it's still a prohibition of payos to cut, even though you're cutting off all the hair off your head. And therefore, what's the pasuk teaching us? To teach us this concept that a positive commandment in us say overrides a regular lav, a regular negative commandment of usakifu pas rashachem. So therefore, we see the Gemara was suggesting that this dispute, but whether or not a kafas kol rosh shema kafa, whether or not cutting off all the hair off your head is considered a violation of cutting off your payos, is actually a dispute amongst the Tanaim. Gemara says, no, I'm a Rava, no. The kuli alma kafas kol rosh shema kafa. Everybody would say that if you cut off all the hair off your head, you're not in violation of cutting off your payos. So why do we need the first pasuk? It's because of the following scenario. Where you first cut off the corners of your head and then you shave the rest of your head. You might have said, since if you're cutting off all the so the pasuk is teaching us, since if you had cut off all the hair from your head at once, you would not be liable. So too, if when you round it off and then shave off the rest of your hair, you're also not going to be liable. So that's what the pasuk is teaching us, that if you were hikif and sof kileach, you're not going to be liable from mitzora. But if you did it all at once, you would indeed, generally speaking, be liable. But we have the pasuk telling us you could do it. So the Gemara says, but me kasev karahachi, would the Torah really be written to tell us? So basically, what Rav is saying, that if you cut off all the corners of your head, you wouldn't be liable. But we need the pasuk to tell us. Meaning, Rav says, if you cut off all the hair off your head, you wouldn't be liable, because a kafa is called rosh, is not called hakafa. But here, the pasuk is telling us that that even in the circumstance where you first cut off the corners of your head and then you shave the rest of your head, you're still not liable, because in the end you shaved everything. The Gemara says, but we really need a pasuk to tell us that, because that shouldn't be permitted. Reish Lakish says, anytime where you have a positive commandment and a negative commandment, if you could fulfill both of them, it would be good. Otherwise, let the negative commandment, let the positive commandment comment override the negative commandment. And in this case, you could fulfill both of them by shaving off all the hair off your head at the same time. And so therefore, you wouldn't be able to first cut off the corners of your head and then shave off the rest of your head. Ella de Koyama. So therefore, the Gemara says, so what must we say? Everybody must be at the position. Akafas called Rosh Shema Kafa. Everybody's in the position that cutting off the entire head is still a violation of cutting off your payas. And so therefore, according to the so basically everybody is saying the Koyama Kafas Kal Rosh Shema Kafa. Everybody is saying that it's a violation of the Torah. So to cut off all the corners of your head. So therefore, according to the first approach, we needed to teach us Asay overrides a Los Asay. And the second approach is just teaching us that it would have been that it's a prohibition. But anyway, Asay is Dochalos Asay in general, so we don't need it. So where does the second, and it's coming to teach us that the Asay is overriding the Asay and the Los Asay of the Nazir. So if that's the case, where does the second brisa know this idea that generally speaking, a positive commandment overrides a negative commandment, which the first brisa had learned from this word Rosha. Uman the Mukim Likra, and the one who says the word Rosho is to teach us about a Nazir, it's to override the prohibition and the positive commandment of a Nazir. Lav grade the Minole. Where does he know this general idea of Asay Dochalos Asay if he doesn't learn it out from Rosho? Mar says Yoaf Mikadilim. He learns it out from the fact that there's a pasuk that tells us in the Torah that you have to make fringes for your garments. Kedilim Tasevach. And the previous pasuk in the Torah, it said, Lo soba shatnes. Now, Amar Kra lo soba shatnes. That the previous verse says you're not allowed to wear shatnes. So the one verse says you're not allowed to wear shatnes. And the next verse says you have to make fringes for your garment. Vitanya, and we learned in the Brisa, lo soba shatnes. You're not allowed to wear wool and linen together. Shatnes. So kedilim ta'aseh lach mehem. But you can make fringes from wool and linen. And so that's what it's teaching us, that the positive commandment of making fringes overrides the negative commandment of shatnes. And according to the first brisa that learns out, say overrides and say positive overrides a negative from the word rosho. My time gedilim. Why doesn't he learn it out from the word gedilim next to shanes? Amalach, look at the Rava, because he says I learned that out from Rava. He says I'll learn it out from Rava, because what did Rava use with the word gedilim and shanes? The Rava Rami Ksiv. Look at the Rava Hudasa. The Rava Rami Ksiv. Rava threw two verses against each other. One verse says v'nasnu al tzitzis hakenaf. So it says in the pasuk that you were supposed to place tzitzis on the corner, but we already know that the tzitzis are going on the corner because it says vasuam tzitzis hakam fevik deyam. So therefore, what do we learn from this? Min kenaf. Patil Tachelas. So we learn from this. Now, what do we learn from the tzitzis hakanaf? It's to teach us that the strings of the tzitzis need to be from the same type of material as the garment. Min kenaf. And we take out the words patil Tachelas, suksiv. And then the next verse says about shatnes. It says next in the Torah. It says, Tzemro pishtim yachtav, that you're not allowed to wear wool and linen. You're not allowed to wear shanes, wool and linen together. Ha ketzad. So it's to teach us. It's to teach us the fundamental principle. It's to teach us Tzemro pishtim potrim bein b'minan bein shelo b'minan. That wool and linen, if they are the fringes, they are the ones that are going to exempt you from the tzitzis, meaning say that they'll fulfill your obligation of tzitzis, whether or not they're on a garment of wool and linen. Bein b'sharminan, bein b'minan, bein shelo b'minan, but sharminan, but all other items b'minan potrim, then the fringes only will exempt you if they're being used for the same type of material as the garment, like silk fringes for a silk garment. Shelo b'minan in a potrim, but if it's not the same type of material, they won't work. So only wool and linen. So that's what this other brisa uses from Gedilim, and so therefore they can't use that verse to teach us the positive commandment overrides another a negative commandment. Gemara says, "Well, b'hai tanan demapik l'rosh ulav greda to asya say v'daches also say v'asay." We know on. So the Gemara says, "Well, this first brisa, which says that the word rosho is to teach us that a positive commandment overrides a negative commandment, how do they know this idea that a positive commandment overrides a positive and negative in the case of the Nazir?" That the Nazir who's a Metzora shaves his head. So where does he know that from? So the Gemara says, Nafkele miskano. He learns it out from the pasuk of miskano, which it says in that verse that he has the Metzora cuts the esroshova as zikano. He cuts off the hair off his head and his beard, and so therefore, the Tanya zikano matamo omar. Why does the pasuk have to tell us that the Metzora cuts off the hair off his beard? Isn't it obvious? Because it says off all the hair of his head. So it says, because it says in the pasuk about a Kohen, it says that the Kohen is not allowed to cut off the corners of his beard. I might think also a Kohen who's a Metzora cannot cut off the corners of his beard. So we say no, also a Metzora who's a Kohen has to cut the corners of his beard. And so that's what he learns out. That's where he learns out the idea of a positive commandment overrides a negative commandment. And so the Gemara says, and that's where he learns the idea that a positive commandment overrides a positive commandment and a negative commandment. Because the Kohen has a negative commandment and a positive commandment. He has the positive commandment of Kedoshim to you, and also the Losa say of Pa'asiganam Moigalechu. So man the mapik le'rosho la'asei v'losasei le'lef miskano. So according to the second brisa that learns out from the word rosho that the Metzora who's a Nazir could cut his hair because it's an asay and a los. Asay learns it out from the Metzora. So why doesn't he learn out from miskano? So the Gemara responds back, tamech. And according to your logic, that you can learn from skano from a Kohen who's a mitzvah that he could cut off the hair of his beard. How can you the kaimu and ba'alma? How do we know this general idea throughout the rest of the Torah on top of Nun Chesem Beis? How do we know in general? How in general? Why don't we say just in general that which we say in the rest of the Torah, that a positive commandment cannot override a positive and negative commandment? Why don't we just say Leiluf Mikohen? Why wouldn't you just learn out from a Kohen the Dachi? Why wouldn't you just learn out from a Kohen that it does override it? El Mikohen lo Yafinon. We don't want to learn out from the Kohen. Why not? Because Mal Kohen Shekin Lav Sheino Shava Bakol. You can't learn out from a Kohen to the rest of the Shas, because a Kohen is a prohibition that's not equivalent to everybody, and so therefore, just like we can't learn out from a Kohen to the rest of the Shas, because the Kohen has unique laws, because it's only for a Kohen. So to Nazir Kohen Nami Lo Yoav Shekin Lav Shein Lashav L'Kol. Also, a Nazir we can't learn out the fact that a Nazir should cut off his hair if he's a Mitzvah from a Kohen, because it's also a prohibition that is not equivalent to everybody. Because the prohibition of the Kohen is a lesser prohibition, because it's not commanded to women, and it's not commanded to the daughters, and so therefore, unlike a Nazir. So the Gemara says, "Man demukim lahai rosho benazir lamawiz kano." So according to the one who says that rosho is to teach us that by a Nazir who's a mitzorah, the assay of the mitzorah overrides the assay and the los assay of the Nazir not cutting his hair. What does he do with the word kano? That's extra. That the other brayso use it to teach us that the Kohen cuts his hair, who's a mitzorah. So what does he do with that? He uses it for the following source, because it says zikano ma talmud lomar. Why does it say the word zikano by a mitzorah? It already says it by it already said the word saro. Because it says by a Kohen that they are not allowed to cut off the corners of their beard. Yachol af Kohen mitzorah kain. I might think also the Kohen is a mitzorah cannot cut off the corners of the beard. Talmud Omer zikano, to teach us that the Kohen is a mitzorah is allowed to cut off the corners of his beard. Uminon the betar, and how do we know that the Kohen is a mitzorah is allowed to cut it off, and he has to cut it off with a razor specifically, because it says upaas titanya upaas sikanam lo yigawechu. It says in the corners of their beard they're not allowed to cut off. So therefore since it says by the Kohen that they're not allowed to cut off the corners of the beard, yachol af kilcho b'misparayim yechayev. I might think, well, even if he cuts it with a scissor, it'll be liable. No, the pasuk says by the prohibition of a regular Jew, it says lo tashlis es pa'asikanecha, and the word tashlis implies that you're removing all the hair. And so we learn Gzeira Shava from Yisrael from pa'asikanecha, and it says by the Kohen pa'as zikanam, just like by the Jew, the prohibition is only with hashchasa, which is with a razor. So too by Kohanim, it's only with hashchasa, but with the scissor, that where you're not cutting off the root, will be permitted. And ilo tashles, and if the prohibition is not to destroy with a razor, I might think that if you do it with a plane, just a plane, that it'll be liable. So what is the giluch that is hashlata? That's with a razor. So we see from here that the word zikano, according to this opinion, is coming to teach us that the positive commandment of tiklachas by a mitzorah is overriding the lav and the assay of a kohen. So we see from here that, and we also see from here from this brayso that the commandment to cut off the hair of the mitzorah is only with a razor, because if it would have been done with a scissors or a plane, then you would have had to do with that. So therefore, we're learning that it has to be done with a razor. And so since the word from a razor is learned out from the word zikano, he's coming to teach us that it's a positive commandment, a negative commandment of the Kohen is overridden by the word zikano. And so therefore, okay, so now we go on. But according to the first brisa, it says that the word rosho is to teach us that in general it overrides a regular law from the Torah. Why do we need it to say the word rosho to tell us that you can override the prohibition of a mitzvah of cutting off his payas? And why does it also have to say the word skano to tell us that the Kohen's beard can be cut off? Why can't we just learn it out? So the Gemara explains. So the Gemara explains as follows: so that on the one hand, it's coming to teach us that asay overrides alos asay, and also it's teaching us, skano is teaching us that the word skano is to override the asay and the alos asay by the Kohen, and so therefore hilkach shakolhu, and so therefore v'yavo shneim, and so therefore we're going to say that the both limudim are equal because they're teaching us two separate things, and we can't say and they're both necessary. You can't learn one without the other. Why? Because Kohen min Nazir lo yolef, you can't learn out. Meaning to say, the question is as follows: according to one who says the word rosho is to teach us just a regular prohibition of asay overrides a los asay, why do we need this? And also, why do we need the word zikano? Why do we need the word zikano, which is to teach us the los asay and the asay of the Kohanim? Why doesn't it just write the word skano? And we would learn out that since the los asay and the asay by a Kohen is permitted, it's also going to be permitted by a Metzorah. And so from the fact that the Torah is not distinguishing between a Kohen and a Yisrael, we would understand we would have learned out that it's able to override both the los asay and the asay by the Kohen and just a regular prohibition by a regular Jew. And hilkach shakolhu, and we would say that they're equal and v'yavo shneim, we can learn out both things. So the Gemara says no. Kohen min Nazir lo yalef. We can't learn out the law of a Kohen from a Nazir. Sheken yeshno b'sheila, because a Nazir could override his law by doing hataras nedarim. And Nazir mi Kohen lo yalef, and we can't learn out the law of a Nazir from a Kohen. Sheken lav sheino shava b'kol, because the Kohen has a prohibition that's not equivalent to everybody, meaning say it's just by the men. And so therefore, and therefore that's also the reason that we can't learn out a Kohen and a Nazir from these laws, that for the rest of the Torah, that an asay overrides a los asay, because we could say that the Kohen and the Nazir have these differences that are not found by other prohibitions, that the Kohen is not allowed shava b'kol, and the Nazir is something that you could do away with she'ela by annulling the vows. So the Gemara goes on to a little bit of a different topic. It's tangentially related, obviously. Amarav Meko Adam Kol Gufo B'Tar. Rav says that a man, can shave off all the hair off of his body with a razor, and he's not going to be in violation, as we'll see from the Gemara, of that a man is not allowed to dress like a woman, even though this is generally speaking a feminine act of shaving off all the hair from his body. He's not going to be in violation by doing that. So Gemara says, we challenge this. But we have a source that says that if a person cuts off his underarm hair and his genitalia hair, he's going to get lashes if a man does that. So why does Rav say you're allowed to do it? And the other source says you're not allowed to do it. Gemara's answer is, with a razor, it's prohibited, but with scissors it would be permitted. The Gemara says you can't say that. Rav Nami Batar. Rav says that also you're allowed to do it even with a razor. So the Gemara says he doesn't mean with a razor, he means ke'ein tar, with something that's like a razor. And Amar Rav Chia bar Abba Rav Yochanan Amavir Beis HaShechi Beis HaErva. Okay. And Rav Chia bar Abba says in the name of Rav Yochanan that if you remove the hair of your underarms and the hair of your genitalia, you're going to get lashes. The Gemara challenges this. The Gemara says it's not a biblical violation for a man to remove the hair from his body. So the Gemara says, now when we say you get lashes, it means rabbinically you get the lashes. All right, we're just going to stop. We finished the daf. We're going to keep going. We're going to stop the recording